Good evening. Welcome to the first keynote event of the SHECP Summer 2020 program, Together for Hope in Rural Poverty. I'm Stephanie Rolfe, and I'm the Academic Director for the Shepherd Higher Education Consortium on Poverty. I'm also the Director of Experiential Learning and Strategic Initiatives at Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi. I know we have folks from all over who are joining us tonight, and I hope you'll take just a second to click on your chat, which is you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and just let us know who you are and how you're joining us. If you're an alumni, if you're a current intern, a community partner, or a faculty or staff member from a member school, maybe just a friend who's curious about what we're doing today. And as you do that, I will do a few housekeeping tips just to make sure that we know how this is going to proceed tonight. So please note that your video and mics are turned off, and they will be throughout the webinar. You can submit questions via the Q&A icon, which is at the bottom of your screen. So you're using the chat now, but you can ask questions through the Q&A, which is in that same bar at the bottom. SHECP staff are going to be monitoring that throughout the event. So feel free to submit questions as our presenters are talking if something comes to mind. And if you would point out who the question is for, or if you would like to ask that question of all the panelists. When we get to the discussion part at the end of the event, we will sort through those questions, and one of our interns will be asking. To our interns, please be sure to take notes and include them with appropriate attribution, of course, for your geography project assignment. This is a really great insight into the way that rural poverty presents itself in different regions, and it also gives you some insight into the unique intervention strategies that happen at the community level. So with that out of the way, we will get started. As many of you know, SHECP is an interinstitutional collaboration across colleges and universities that support the study of poverty as a complex social problem and provide opportunities for undergraduates from a wide range of disciplines and career trajectories. Through its programs, including the summer internships our students have just begun, SHECP and its member institutions prepare students for a lifetime of professional and civic efforts to diminish poverty and enhance human capability. As this evening's platform reminds us, we are building our SHECP community and fulfilling our mission across virtual spaces this summer, with a cohort of 84 interns from 20 colleges and universities across the country. Our community partners have been incredibly generous with their flexibility and their innovation to support these interns remotely, even as many of them are situated at the center of elevated need and uncertainty in the midst of simultaneous crises, one new and the other historic. We thank them again, including our panelists from Together for Hope tonight, for continuing their work and allowing SHECP to partner with them and learn. Poverty intersects with all existing barriers to social justice. And as our executive director, Jim Langford, stated in his response to what are only the most recent examples of racism in its most violent form, SHECP stands against any act that undermines human dignity and recognizes that the work to diminish poverty and to enhance human capability must necessarily also be anti-racist work. We hope all of our community members will take up this mantle and learn with us as we recommit to this work and accept the daily renewal of justice in both our individual acts and through our communities. Tonight's program is the first of 4 keynote events related to our summer programming theme, the geography of poverty and pandemic. Our summer community read, Scott W. Allard's Places in Need, centers our learning community around location and the ways in which place informs experiences of poverty. Allard's work and the work of scholars, practitioners, and policymakers from which the book's contribution builds reminds us that without a deeply informed knowledge of place and community, intervention strategies will miss their mark in addressing the nuanced causes of consequences and poverty that attach to a town, a county, a state. Tonight's event focuses on rural poverty in the United States by featuring the work of Together for Hope, the Rural Development Coalition of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. Our panelists represent 3 different locations of rural poverty interventions: the Delta, Appalachia, and the Black Belt. Together for Hope represents a critical contributor to anti-poverty work through the commitment of faith-based organizations who see it as their responsibility to put faith into action toward progress in our communities. Their assets-based approach leverages the collective wealth of a community and its human and natural resources as the most important tool toward local economic development. I hope you will find their work inspiring and insightful to the unique profile of rural spaces within the larger landscape of anti-poverty work. In addition to contributing to our panel tonight, TFH is also a SHECP partner for the first time this summer, supporting 4 of our students through remote internship work. Yes, worth some applause. Some of these interns have graciously agreed to guide our programming tonight, and I'm looking forward to welcoming them in and introducing them before turning it over to our panelists. So first, I will introduce you to Michaela Nadeau-Williams. And Michaela, if you will, let's see, I will enable your video here. There she is. Michaela is a rising junior at the University of Vermont, and she's studying sociology and economics with a minor in music. In addition to her academic work, she's involved across a number of programs at UVM, including residence life and campus events. This summer, Michaela is working with Together for Hope's Delta region under the supervision of Linda Stringfellow, who is one of our featured panelists tonight. And our second intern to help us with introductions is Will Kammerer, a rising sophomore at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Will is working in partnership with Together for Hope Appalachia under the supervision of Keith Stillwell, another featured panelist tonight. Thank you both for participating tonight and to our attendees for being here. I will now turn it over to Michaela and then Will. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello to everyone and welcome. It is my pleasure to introduce you to 2 of our panelists this evening, Elma Cole-Stringfellow and Rachel Gunter-Shepard. Elma Cole-Stringfellow is Regional Vice President for Together for Hope's Delta region. Her professional and academic background includes 19 years at Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi, where she was the former regional director for the MDSC AmeriCorps VISTA program and served 5 years in an interim capacity as director for the Center for Community and Economic Development. Ms. Stringfellow holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Mississippi Valley State University, a master's in criminal justice from Delta State University, and a master's in human capital development from the University of Southern Mississippi. She is also a certified economic development finance professional from the National Development Council. She has received numerous awards and recognitions, but her most honorable achievements include being a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, being on the planning team for the inaugural cycling event, Civil Rides, planning multi-state conferences for the cooperation of National and Community Service and Lower Mississippi Delta Service Corps, being a member of the Class 1 with the Mid-South Delta Leaders Program, and participating in the Learn and Service trip to South Africa with MSDI Foundation for the Mid-South. Reverend Rachel Gunter-Shepard is the Regional Vice President for Together for Hope Black Belt. She is also one of the co-founders of Pastors for Florida Children, a public education advocacy group in the Sunshine State. Previously, she serves as the Associate Coordinator of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of Florida from June 2012 to March 2020, as an elder care advocate at Baptist Health in Jacksonville, Florida from 2009 to 2012, and as a hospice chaplain for Vista Care Hospice in Lubbock, Texas from 2006 to 2009. I'm now going to pass it over to Will.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce Keith Stillwell and Reverend Dr. Jason Coker. Keith Stillwell is a Regional Vice President for Appalachia and Together with Hope. Keith has served in church staff ministry for over 30 years, focusing on spiritual formation and missions. As Associate Pastor for Discipleship with Lexington Avenue Baptist Church, he has led the Mountain Hope Task Force for Cooperative Baptist Fellowship Kentucky in the early years of Together for Hope. Keith received his Master of Divinity from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville in 1988, and his Doctor of Ministry from the Baptist Theological Seminary at Richmond, Virginia in 2000. Reverend Dr. Jason Coker is the National Director of Together for Hope and the Rural Development Coalition of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship and the coordinator of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of Mississippi. In his dual roles, Dr. Coker fights poverty in the 301 counties of persistent rural poverty in America. Following the philosophy of assets-based community development, he engages in rural communities, focusing on education, health and nutrition, housing and environment, and social enterprise. This holistic approach to poverty alleviation is rooted in Dr. Coker's experience of growing up poor in the Mississippi Delta. It also affects how he understands systematic racism and how that continues to wreak havoc on American society. Prior to his work with Together for Hope, Dr. Coker served as a pastor at Wilton Baptist Church in Wilton, Connecticut for 9 years. He completed his master's in religion from Yale Divinity School and completed his PhD at Drew University. Grounded in the work he did while in Connecticut and his work along the Uganda-Kenya border, coordinating a child development center for orphans with AIDS/HIV, Coker founded Delta Hands for Hope, DHH, in 2013, which is a partner organization with Together for Hope. Since its incorporation, DHH has become an award-winning nonprofit that reaches far beyond Shaw, Mississippi. Please join me in welcoming our first panelist, Reverend Dr. G.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so that you can see the slide that I have for you. Let me get that up. There we go. I'm Jason Coker. It's a pleasure to be with you all here at SHEP. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Together for Hope and then tackle two specific things Stephanie asked me to deal with you guys, or at least address with you. Together for Hope is a rural development coalition, started as a rural poverty initiative, but we wanted to reframe how we talked about it because poverty is such a deficit mindset, and following assets-based community development, we wanted to live into our strengths. So we kind of reframed who we are, and now we're a rural development coalition. Our focus is the 301 counties of persistent rural poverty in America. And that is, you'll see, breaks into 5 ethno-geographies of persistent rural poverty. So when you guys talk about the geography of poverty, this is what it looks like in rural space. The Delta encompasses the entire area up along the Mississippi River. There's 97 counties there, and those counties are primarily African American. The Black Belt, and I'll show you a map of this in a second. The Black Belt has 80 counties and goes from Alabama to Southern Virginia. Appalachia has 55 counties, native lands 44 counties, and the Rio Grande Valley 25 counties. And each one of those, you'll see, carries an ethnic or racial predominance. So both geography and race are always indicative of rural poverty. And right now, as we are finally pushed to a point of the country to try to do something about systemic racism, I'd say that our work in both geography and race and ethnicity, we're always dealing with race, not just race, but racism in particular, and how that's contributed to issues of poverty. For some reason, I'm not, there we go. So this is what the map looks like. The red is, the red counties are all the counties, but this red circle is Appalachia. The yellow section is the Black Belt. The dark blue is Delta, light blue native lands, and orange is the Rio Grande Valley. So that's our focus. Our philosophy is assets-based community development, also known as ABCD. We don't go in and ask what people need. We build relationships with communities in rural space and ask them what they have. And we go through an assets mapping exercise, and we always start with the question of what are your dreams? And we were doing this in this town of about 300 people in the middle of the Mississippi Delta. And, you know, everybody says, we want a better education, all this. Well, this one kid raised his hand and he goes, I want a mall. And that's the dream of our children in rural America. Just because they live in rural space that's indicative of rural poverty, they still have dreams and they have assets. So what does the town have? What are the assets in the towns? And then how do you use those assets towards community development? That's the foundation of assets-based community development. And then our priorities. We have 4 priorities of HOPE: education, health and nutrition, housing and environment, and social enterprise. These 4 kind of represent a holistic approach to poverty relief and development. If we realize if we were really good at creating health, education, and housing interventions, we'd create a great place for kids to leave their small towns and never come back. So social enterprise is an attempt to create local economies of scale in those rural spaces so the kids don't have to leave and never come back home. This gives them an economy of jobs that they can come back to. And then our strategies. We look at interventions primarily from almost all of our sites across rural America focus on interventions. So an intervention is exactly what it sounds like. It's an intervention into a system that creates poverty. So educational interventions, and this is where we live into our 4 priorities of HOPE. After school programs, those are educational interventions. Summer food programs, those are health and nutrition interventions. Housing programs where we're renovating houses or building houses, those are housing interventions. And that's intervening in a system that is designed to create the kind of outcomes that we see in poverty. So these are systems that create poverty, right? The next way we try to look at poverty is through innovation, right? How do we create new ways of doing things? And so we have a lot of fun stuff in agriculture right now, looking at people who are doing what we call agropreneurship in rural space. Other things are things like tech labs, and how do we attract technology to come rural because it's already mobile, and if it's mobile, why can't it be rural, in rural space? So how do we innovatively think about alleviating poverty in rural space? And finally, advocacy. I was in a conference out in Palo Alto at Stanford, and everybody there was about innovation. And then I came back to the East Coast, went to another meeting in Columbia, and everybody there was just like, nonprofits are good, they come and go. The only thing that's going to make real change is through policy. And it was real interesting, this advocacy / policy group versus an innovation group. And I think it's both of those. We have to advocate for policies of justice that change the system so that the system doesn't create so much poverty. So how do you advocate for policies that literally change the system and make it more equitable and just? So this is kind of a fact sheet that we have that kind of lists everything we say. The persistent rural poverty definition is 20% of a rural county living below the poverty line for the last 30 years. So that is the definition by the United States Department of Agriculture for persistent rural poverty in America. And there you see our map again. But right now, what is the nature of rural poverty? I think there are 2 major factors that contribute to rural poverty. One is abandonment. And this, if you look at that map, industry has abandoned those regions from farming, from mining, and from manufacturing. So those industries have left the people or the land. The other avenue of abandonment is by moving Native Americans to reservations. So it is truly the nature of rural poverty, this idea of abandonment, either through industry or reservations. The other aspect of the nature of rural poverty has to do with access, access to employment, access to food, access to banking, access to education. In rural space, you're just too far away from those things to be close. So your proximity is a major issue And so transportation is always a major factor in rural America. So, but I think when you look at all of it, it's those two things: abandonment and access define the nature of persistent rural poverty in America. And now, you look at what's happening with COVID-19. This is some of the pictures we have. COVID-19 is just nothing more than a big magnifying glass that has accentuated all of our socio-economic problems in the United States of America. So where things were hard for people who live in poverty, now they've just been harder. And what you see here, top right, is boxes that were delivered today in Delta Hands for Hope in Shaw, Mississippi, hundreds of family food boxes. Each box will feed a family for a week. Bottom right is a line of cars lining up for another food pantry in a town called Itabena. And then you see another load of grocery or family food boxes down in the Rio Grande Valley with our practitioner, Jorge Zapata. So those are some of the ways we've been responding to COVID-19. Education, access to internet, those are some of the other major barriers for us since COVID-19. That has really kind of given us a larger challenge. But it's basically all the work we've always been doing, times some kind of exponent. So that's kind of give a general overview of Together for Hope and the kind of work we do. Now I'll let our regional vice presidents share exactly what they do on a local level.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Linda.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm L. Nicole Stringfellow, Vice President with the Delta region. And the first thing that I would like to do is share my screen so that I can get some input from you. So as I'm getting ready to share my screen, I would ask everyone to get ready to be able to provide some input through Annotate. Okay. So when you think of the word, when you hear the word Delta, if you're able to enter on the screen exactly your thoughts pertaining to the Delta. Okay, I see a Mississippi. What are your other thoughts? I'm seeing struggle. What else? When you hear the word Delta, what do you think of? Southern. I'm seeing some notes in the comments. Stars School. Okay, what else? Change. Okay, keep going, keep going. What else do we see? Segregation. What else? Hot. Poor education system. Strength. Okay. What else do we see? Blues. Southern poverty. Food deserts. All right. Okay. You all are getting it. You all are getting it. Good. Okay. So when we talk about the Mississippi Delta, I see farming and lack of opportunity, good people and good food. Hey, that's great food, great food. Deep, rich culture, segregation. Okay. All right. Thank you all for your input. So when we talk about the Delta, we're also looking at, it's a little slow, neighbors. When we say the Delta consists of where the Mississippi River runs. And if we go back to the old school social studies class, if we start, remember, here's the man's face, and then we come down his body, here's his belly, we come down his leg and thighs to his calves and his feet. So that's where the Mississippi River runs. So the shaded area, that is going to be the lower Mississippi River Delta, and the states that we cover in Together for Hope Delta consist of Arkansas, Illinois, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, and Tennessee. So, okay, so you all have an idea of the area. So if you would take a minute and if you can put a star or a check mark in the area, those that are viewing us, put a star or a check mark in the area where you are from. I see Kentucky, some of the feed that I'm seeing in the chat. I see Kentucky, Kentucky again. Welcome, Kentucky. Western Kentucky, Illinois, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Cleveland, too far north, Southwest Virginia, Ohio, Vermont, Florida, Minnesota. Okay, Alabama, Connecticut, that is great. Northern Alabama, Texas, North Carolina, great. Thank you all for your feedback. Okay, so for those that were able to put stars and those that are giving us feedback, I really do appreciate it. We have a diverse group on the screen with us. So, all right, so in the lower Mississippi Delta, I am based in Mississippi. Right now in the Delta part, of course, of Mississippi, and a large part of our focus is in Arkansas, Louisiana, and the Mississippi Delta. When we talk about the Delta, one of the main reasons for the poverty in the Delta region deals with the socio-economic factors. And I don't care to say the name poor or use the word poor. So we would say less than quality housing, less than quality schools, less than quality healthcare, less than quality employment or employers. And like Jason mentioned, we talked about industries, and also less than quality in some areas, lifestyle for particular individuals. And in the Delta area, when we talk about these socioeconomic structures, they come from, that's just the truth of the matter, they come from structures and industries of social and economic control. These structures were set in place years ago. And for those that are not familiar with the Delta area, of course, is a heavy farming area. And years ago, I don't want to go through a history class, but years and years ago, you have, of course, cotton was king, and you had a lot of African-American people living in the region, but people got out for a better life. They got out, they had to get away. So they went north through Memphis, and a lot of individuals ended up in Illinois, Indiana, and other parts of the north. So there was a big migration out of the South, but a lot of the migration were quite a few men, and that left a lot of single women in the Delta for those that want to go and do gender history pertaining to its impact on the Delta region. So we're talking about institutions of social and social control that had an impact, and then we're talking about laws, rules, and regulations that were put in place that had an impact on the area. And we've honestly been building systems and industries and companies and schools on top of structures that were created to be unfair to particular populations. So always keep that in mind when you talk about the Mississippi Delta. When people talk about the Delta, the good things, they talk about the food, they enjoy themselves, the people are so friendly, but they immediately also talk about, oh, how poor. But remember, this is the region that was built on particular structures that were created just for that design. So some of the examples of strategies and action interventions that I'm working with in the Delta is we work with nonprofits pertaining to capacity building, leveraging resources, diversifying their funding, building the leadership in the organizations and the nonprofits, as well as helping the leaders understand that they will not be there forever, and we must also work with you on a sustainability plan as well as a succession plan, because even individuals that lead nonprofit organizations, they do want to retire, just like individuals that work in government and other industries. So some of the other things that we look at is we are unique with Together for Hope because we take a different approach. We look at the positive, the assets, but we also look at showing government, business, nonprofit, and individuals in small communities how we can work better together. If you come with this portion, we come with this portion, someone else come with another portion, we're able to make it better. So I always use the tagline, we're better together. And that's a concept that we use. And it may seem odd, but we are in an area, and this is not just for this area. Organizations are very territorial. So we find ways to start breaking the barrier so they will stop being territorial, and we will start looking at how we truly can work together, because no matter what part, what race, gender you are, if you're in the Delta, you are in a low resource area, and we have to figure out a way to make this work. We know we talk about policy change. We know we talk about advocacy work. We talk about local and state government, but the biggest thing pertaining to areas such as this or any part of the nation, it is the people. The people are the biggest assets. And if you get enough people together, you're either gonna make it or you're either gonna break it. It can go one way or the other. So we focus on the people. And the things when we talk about this public health matter, C19 has done nothing but expose, but what we've been trying to tell you for the longest. In areas like this, low resources, access to healthcare, something as simple as having access to be able to do the testing for the pandemic. Our rounds with being able to get the test at the last minute, or not having enough, or getting it way after some of the other bigger areas across the state received the testing kits. So my response has lately been, when people ask, well, how has the public health matter or the pandemic impacted the area? The first thing I said, well, duh, we've been trying to tell you all for the longest that, hey, this has been going on for centuries because we're built on structures that created it to be a lack. So that's my response pertaining to the public health matter. And we're finding creative ways to make that work. We do have broadband issues in the region, but we're finding ways to get what would be wonderful if somebody may be on this line. If we can get mobile internet units into smaller communities so that businesses and people could be able to do the things that they need to do when we're talking about broadband usage. Instead of waiting for ground lines to be laid, no, let's get a mobile unit into these communities so that we can still move forward. We're finding the social enterprise component. We're finding entrepreneurs. Some people have gone to an entrepreneur capacity off of a skill and a talent that they have. So we're looking at how we're going to make this work once again, because this is not the first challenge that this region has had, but this is a challenge that none of us were prepared for. So what I would do at this time, I said, thank you for visiting us in the Delta region, and I am going to turn it over to Keith in Appalachia.
Hello. Yes, I'm Keith, Regional Director with or Vice President with the Appalachian region. So I'm privileged to work in the mountains of Appalachia, a region rich in natural resources, beauty, art, recreation, and innovative people. I'd like to show you a map, share my screen at this time. And this is the region. You'll see 57 counties, 39 in Kentucky, 8 in West Virginia, 7 in Tennessee, 2 in Virginia, and 1 in Ohio. And let me introduce you to some of the Together for Hope family. Scarlett Jasper is a Cooperative Baptist Fellowship field personnel who directs Olive Branch Ministries. She works in southeastern Kentucky and Scott County, Tennessee. She teaches financial literacy, nutrition, and is involved in crisis ministry, among other things. She works closely with school family resource centers and many other groups in that region. One of the things she does, along with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship Kentucky, is a program called Extreme Build. We build a home every year in McCreary County with a host of volunteer laborers. This year, this August, we'll build our 14th home. The McGuire Mission Center is another one of our sites. When Together for Hope started in 2001 with the 20 poorest counties, 2 of those were in Kentucky, McCreary County and Owsley County. And at First Baptist Church Frankfort, a tiny but fierce elderly lady named Emma Guire with a big heart grabbed the missions minister and dragged him to Owsley County, 2 hours away and 6 counties over, to see what they could do in one of those counties that CBF had targeted. And after many conversations with locals, this is Extreme Build, I missed that, but after many conversations with locals, First Baptist Church purchased an old hotel that was abandoned and established the McGuire Mission Center that's been engaged in all types of mission involvement with the community ever since. The Appalachian Immersion Experience, a ministry of First Baptist Church Middlesboro, they renovated some of their education space to create a wonderful space for teams to come and stay. They provide educational, relational, and service-oriented Appalachian cultural immersion experience in the region. Their vision is mission in the mountains with integrity. Service plus learning equals lasting change. And then Bridges for Hope Bluefield was the result of an asset mapping exercise that Jason led, he described earlier, in Bluefield, where they identified the assets of the community, built partnerships, and set priorities with CBF Virginia, the Baptist General Association of Virginia, and Women's Missionary Union of Virginia, and with Bluefield partners, Bluefield College, who also hosts Impact Youth Mission Camps sponsored by Baptist General Association of Virginia, the Wade Center for Children, Teens, and Young Adults, Korea Company Makerspace, that's Travis Lowe who directs that, and McDowell County Farms. Cooperative Baptist Fellowship state organizations are very key, important partners in our work. CBF Kentucky, CBF Virginia, and Tennessee CBF. And we work with the Appalachia Service Project and Christian Community Development Association. One of the big stories of poverty in Appalachia is extractive industries. Coal, lumber, where resources are taken out of the region. Some cheap labor is provided, but the big profits go to those outside the community, and the resources go outside the community, and it's not a diverse economy. So when these industries decline, then so does the economy. and even the opioid crisis. The pills come in and the money goes out. So add to that the physical isolation due to mountains, and creates many challenges for Appalachia. But there are a number of groups in Appalachia addressing these systemic economic issues. Groups like the Mountain Association for Economic Development, Southeast Kentucky Economic Development Corporation, Grow Appalachia, FAHE, the Promise Zone, and many others are working to diversify the economy, encourage businesses that keep more of the economy within the community, and doing it in an environmentally friendly ways. The pandemic has caused a challenge with this and has worked against that diversity, as many of the smaller businesses are not going to survive this. And so larger businesses are able to maintain and weather the storm. And so we lose some of that diversity. So there's a challenge with that. For example, Bluefield Hospital is closing, and they're losing 300 plus jobs as a result of that. I'm glad to have Will working with this summer, and we're going to focus on advocacy, looking at what Together for Hope can do to make a difference, to advocate for change, to work with this awareness that hopefully people have about the causes of poverty, and look for ways that we can have the most influence on the system and advocacy. The question is, will persons affected by poverty bear most of the burden of budget cuts to education, to health, and the safety net, et cetera? And so how can we be an advocate for change that does not further burden those who are experiencing poverty in Appalachia? So that's a little bit about our region, and I'll turn it over to Rachel at this time.
Hey everybody, this is Rachel, and I work with the Black Belt region of Together for Hope. And many of you may know that the Black Belt used to be called the Cotton Belt, and that was because the economy initially was based on the cotton plantations. And it was renamed the Black Belt due to the rich, fertile soil, the color of the soil that runs through the region. A little bit of history around the Black Belt is that it has a large African-American population, and it has historically been ranked toward the bottom of American regions when it comes to those terms that indicate quality of life. So high poverty rates, low to median incomes, high mortality rates, as well as unemployment rates, and low education levels. So we have definitely seen that African Americans living in the Black Belt continue to have limitations that are placed on them by the tremendous barriers that systemic racism places on them. And I like to describe it as there are no bootstraps long enough or strong enough for many of them to pull themselves out of the place of poverty that they are in without systemic change that requires all of us working together. Now, I do want to share a slide with you all. This is the Black Belt region of Together for Hope, and it consists of rural persistent poverty counties in Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. There are 80 counties of persistent rural poverty within these states. There were 40 alone in the state of Georgia. So the Black Belt region is the second largest region of persistent rural poverty in the US, second only to the Delta. Now we do have some Together for Hope sites that have been working for many years in the Black Belt region. And so I do want to share with you a little bit about that. But before I do, I want to make sure that you have a clear sense of what we mean when we talk about asset-based community development. And so I have this quote that I think illustrates it perfectly by Lilla Watson, who is an Australian activist. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. This right here is the essence of asset-based community development. When we know and understand that our liberation is tied to that of our neighbors, that their freedom from poverty, their freedom from barriers is interconnected with ours, that we all belong to one another and therefore should be working for the liberation of all humankind. That is the focus of Together for Hope in the Black Belt region and really in all of our regions. Let me stop the share. Well, we won't do that quite yet. So Sowing Seeds of Hope, I do want to share a little bit about that with you so you know about one example of who we are. It is in Perry County, Alabama, Sowing Seeds of Hope. It has been in existence for 20 years. And this organization has really developed innovative solutions that have improved the quality of life for the residents in Perry County. Now, last year, Sowing Seeds of Hope partnered with close to 5,000 people in Perry County, and it only has a population of 9,000. So you see the kind of impact that we have. And what I love about Sowing Seeds of Hope is that their goal is to empower local leaders. They want to encourage this grassroots participation, and that really allows for the Perry County residents to define their own dreams. And they have input, they have control over their future, and that is their goal. I want to give you a little glimpse of what they have going on in one of their areas of focus, which is health. And that will give you a sense of what they do in their community. So volunteers and retired nurses hold regular health fairs in the community. They assist with helping residents in their community obtain the necessary prescription medication that they need but cannot access. They help educate residents around insurance coverage for people all the way from the youngest infant to the most senior adult. Through a partnership with Sanford's McWhirter School of Pharmacy, they offer a weekly hypertension clinic as well as a monthly diabetes support group. And these programs that they have really become a model at the national level for the ways that rural nonprofits can relate to pharmacy schools. They also have been the driving force with bringing a dialysis clinic to Marion, Alabama, the town where Perry County is. And they've reduced the burden of having to travel 20 miles each way for their residents to receive dialysis care. They also do not have an emergency room or inpatient hospital service. They haven't had that for 2 decades, so they continue to advocate around that. And I love that with all the interventions with health that they've done over the years, they really have seen a steady decrease in the mortality rate in their county. And so people are living longer and healthier lives because an organization like Sowing Seeds of Hope exists in their county. I also want to say that they've really stepped up to the challenge when it comes to COVID-19. They had a lack of testing in their area, and so they began advocating right away. They wanted to see free mobile clinics occur in their area so that people could have that access to testing, and they were able to get that for their community. There was also a 2-week gap when their school district was not able to provide meals for their students who were transferred to virtual school at home. And so they filled in that gap until the school was able to pick that back up. They've been delivering groceries during this time because people have lost income due to the pandemic. And they've also helped purchase medicine and supplies that people needed who were diagnosed with COVID-19. So beautiful work happening in Perry County, Alabama. Now, beyond the Black Belt sites that we already have in existence, we are working to expand the Together for Hope Coalition in all 80 counties of persistent rural poverty. And so we're making connections with those nonprofits that are already doing beautiful work, this asset-based community work that we're talking about, community development work in these counties. And so we connect with them so that we can all be a part of a larger network, sharing best practice and learning from one another. Now, one last thing that I thought I would do, because I know you all can't be hands-on, boots on the ground in your sites. We're having to do this virtual internship for those of you interning this summer. But typically, I would do an orientation when folks are going to engage with community members who've been living in generational poverty. And so I thought I'd maybe share a few of those concepts, do's and don'ts of how to engage in these neighborhoods of endemic poverty. So I wanted to begin by saying, that when we enter into a community of generational poverty, we shouldn't approach from a they need us perspective. That kind of superhero attitude, it's not helpful and it's also not accurate. So we want to approach community engagement from the viewpoint of we need each other. That is truth. That is the actuality, that all of us need one another. Another thing that I think we have to remember is when we walk into the communities of poverty, we don't want to stereotype. We don't want to judge community members. We need to see the root causes of poverty. We need to understand the stresses that a life lived in poverty creates. And we need to relate to people as human beings and out of love. I think another important thing to remember when we enter into communities of poverty is that we don't want to determine projects and initiatives based on what we see. Instead, we have to do a lot of listening in order to discover what are the community-wide priorities. And therefore, community input, buy-in, and leadership has to drive anything that happens within those community initiatives. I think this is important too, that it's very simple, but we don't want to take pictures of community members or of the conditions in which residents live in communities of poverty. This can be hurtful, it can be demeaning. In essence, we would want to take pictures with community members. If we've shared experience, if we've developed relationship over working side by side on an issue that is important to both of you, then it's appropriate to do that. I also think I've seen this time and time again, that we don't want to write about or talk about community residents in a way that we would never do if we were talking to them directly face to face. I have truly seen, and this is a hard thing to share, but I have seen over time that we have seen some patronizing and disrespectful articles written and things said. And so it is truly, truly important to make sure that we only talk about folks in a way that we would if we were face to face talking with them directly. So in closing, I wanted to share one more quote that I think is an important one. And so I share this one with you. And this is by June Jordan, South African poet. And she says, "We are the ones that we have been waiting for. We don't wait around for government officials, for the faith community, for some compelling leader, for an important community stakeholder or a community investor to eradicate poverty. It's up to us. We are the ones that we are waiting for." But thank goodness we don't have to do it alone. We do this together. All of us can walk this road together, knowing that your liberation is bound up in mine in yours, and every single one of us deserves to have the opportunity to thrive. And so now I hand it back over to Stephanie, and she's going to continue to lead us in our evening.
Thanks, Rachel. And I'm just going to be here for a second. I'm actually going to turn over the discussion period to Zoria McAnuff. Zoria is actually a rising senior at Juniata College, where she is pre-med and majoring in biology with a minor in French. Zoria's work this summer is partnered with Sowing the Seeds of Hope in Perry County, Alabama, which Rachel just reviewed with us. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Zoria, to moderate our questions. Thanks.
everybody. Thank you for joining today. So we have the time for a couple questions for our panelists. So the first question, from an economic perspective, do you utilize microloans? If so, how and what's their effect?
Yeah, I'll take that. I tried to answer that in the chats. Microloans have been, this is kind of a mixed bag of results all over the world, not just here in the United States. So we don't do microloans. We do partner with a lot of CDFIs, community development financial institutions across the country, like Hope Credit Union, Southern Bank Corps, and help local people have access to capital. Because you hear food desert a lot, but a lot of people in rural America suffer from banking deserts as well. So we don't have any direct loan or microloan programs within our agency, but we do partner with organizations that have that, and we try to get people to those spaces.
Okay. Another question that we have, what specific healthcare programs do you have in your given regions, and how have you used healthcare to further educate people?
Rachel, do you want to take that with Frances? I mean, I think she's our greatest example of healthcare.
Yes, I mean, I feel I did kind of go over all the healthcare implementations that they've done thus far, but she does continue to work for the county. Frances Ford is the executive director of Sowing Seeds of Hope in Perry County, and she's been there from the beginning, doing beautiful work. And she is a nurse, and she works for their county health department as well. And so she's shared throughout the community, but they continue to keep an eye on those health deficits that they see, and education is a huge part of that. They're constantly bringing people to their center and also in the community centers, and providing health education, both for children, for students, for adults, for senior adults, so at all ages. And I mentioned the partnership with the pharmacy school, and they just do such wonderful work of weekly and monthly connecting with people that have major health concerns. And so they're always looking to expand that when they see something that is an issue within their community.
Thank you. So this question is specifically for Linda. How are public and private entities working together to promote the expansion of broadband and internet access in the Delta region?
Okay, in the Delta we have, yes, that's a very good question. In the Delta we're now meeting with some of our local representatives to see if we can work with, I want to say AT&T and some other companies about getting an actual mobile unit. I asked for a bus, an old school bus, to be renovated, but my wish has not come true. But AT&T is working with us and some of the local communication companies to get it into the smaller towns. And when I say smaller towns, let's say, for instance, Cleveland, Mississippi, or Greenwood, Mississippi, but you have smaller towns such as Benoit, Beulah, Gunnison, Pace, Sidon. So those are communities that may have 200, 300 people. So I would say AT&T once again, and even some of the cable companies if possible. The process to lay an actual ground line, of course, is going to take longer, but the businesses, because we know that there's a need, especially when the school closed in March. So they are working together to the best of their abilities, and we are getting state and national companies involved in getting solutions for this.
Okay, thank you. How do some geographical areas compare to others when talking about redlining and other systemic forms of deeply rooted racism? Is this a larger or more difficult issue than some areas are facing versus others?
It's interesting. Redlining probably had more effect on our rural spaces 25 years ago than it does now, mainly because of white flight, especially in predominantly African American or Latina environments. has no effect on Native Americans. You know, in Shaw, where Delta Hands for Hope is, in 1984, that town elected its first African-American mayor. And that year, white people started leaving that town. And so it was just, you know, now Shaw, I think, has 56 white people in it in a town of about 1,800. So that's the kind of white flight that's happened. People of means have moved out. So redlining, it really, it makes less of a difference now than what it did probably in the 70s and 80s. But since the mid 80s, 90s, a lot of our places have been gutted of populations. And those populations are primarily white and people with means who've gotten out. They've abandoned rural space as well.
Thank you. So another question that we have, how do you work to specifically address racial disparities in health outcomes in your work? And this is open to anybody.
Racial disparities, you know, in Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Delta, those are areas that are predominantly African American. And the racism there goes old and deep. And, you know, most of what you see there is a result of racism that goes all the way back to plantation period, right? And so it's entrenched in the public school systems, where once integration happened, public school systems were defunded in all of those states, Mississippi in particular. And so the public schools were abandoned. A whole set of private schools were built for white kids, and they still are there today. And so the schools continue to be segregated, but based on money. Kids with means, white kids with means, went to private schools. So systemic racism runs deep in the Delta and Black Belt and the Rio Grande Valley on the Texas-Mexico border. Not to mention native lands. I mean, in all of those areas, racism is entrenched. And one of the things, being a church, a religious organization, we have a lot of our churches that like to go on mission trips and go to these communities. And we really hammer those churches about the dignity of the community and partnership style. So they don't just come one week and never come back. We encourage them to build a relationship and return. And what's happened is, especially in the Delta, some of these white churches come into the Delta, really do build a good relationship with them. And it's helped the community realize that not all white people are bad, which has been their lived experience for the most part. And Linda, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you and I are from the same place just about. And so that's been wildly helpful. Also, in a dignity building endeavor, we ask churches when they come to invite the local kids and the local organizations come back to their hometown and let them be missionaries and work in those areas, so that the kids in our small towns aren't just there to receive help from churches, but also understand that they can be agents of transformation at a social level as well. So they go and do mission trips. So that begins to kind of chip away at some of the kind of outright racist spaces. But the systemic stuff is, that's a long game. And, you don't have a quick win in systemic change because that's cultural change. And that's long term. I think the relationships that are being built right now across rural America in our agencies are changing people individually, but as far as policy change, like changing public school policy, public funding of teachers, I mean, that's legislative action, and that's part of our advocacy work. I know Rachel's doing that in Florida for sure. So that's a long and labored way of kind of answering your question, but entrenched racism is in this space in ways that are just palatable and visceral.
Thank you. So another one we have, do you partner with any government agency, and what is your relationship with the state and federal government?
I mean, I would like to say when it comes to advocacy and policy change, we have to be connected both at the local, at the state, at the federal level. And the biggest part of this is elevating the voices of those that have not been heard. And so these folks, like the groups that we've mentioned here that are on the ground, you know, they know the names of the folks that are struggling in these counties of persistent rural poverty. They know their situations. They know how the current laws are impacting them. And if we can help elevate those stories, those narratives, then we can help see why there is a need for a change for policy. So we have to know our legislators. We have to know those that are making the laws in our local, state, and federal level. And we have to be respectful to them. Doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but we have to create relationships that are long-term, because these policies are not going to be changed overnight. And so we have to make sure that they are listening to us for the long haul.
I want to add to what Rachel said. For this area, working with local, state, national government is essential, because sometimes we're not able to sit at the table, and we do need people to speak for us. And when I say us, I'm talking about everyday people, be able to truly speak for us. And we're able to have conversations with quite a few of them that is completely transparent. We're not trying to dance the dance with terminology, politics, none of that. We can have completely transparent conversations, and it's respected. Like Rachel said, it's very respectable, because you can just tell me, no, that's not going to happen, or not in this lifetime, or yes, there's a grand possibility, or we may have to ease into those things. So it's a good working relationship, and at the same time, we're expecting a better relationship.
Great, thank you. So I think we have time for probably 2 more questions. So what is your primary and secondary sources of funding, and what mediums do you use to spread the name of your organization and encourage engagement?
I beg and borrow, I try and do not steal for our group. That's a responsibility I feel in some profound ways, but we have a major grant from a family foundation in Texas. We are, because we are a ministry of a denomination, that denomination has a large line item for us. So all the churches that tithe and give offerings to our denominational headquarters, there's a number that is given, allocated to us. And then we work on other grants from a municipal level, state level, and federal level. We've received USDA grants to do summer food programs. We are working on a pretty major grant right now to do food initiatives in the state of Mississippi. So grants, right now we have a lot of our local organizations have received PPP loans through the Small Business Administration during the COVID-19 CARES Act. And so, you know, we've helped them fill out that paperwork and process that paperwork. So we are open to funding anywhere, and I'm always looking for it. And I know the VPs are too in their regions. And every time you receive money from any type of entity, there's always strings attached. So while we look for money, what we don't want to do is have mission drift. So we are a mission-driven organization. We believe in what we're doing. We believe that our vision is strong and it's based on locals. So we do not receive money that directs us. We're not going to be a pet project to a large donor. That is a pretty adamant thing that stance we take. We will receive money gratefully, but we're the ones who are doing this, and there's real transformation that's happened at the grassroots, and those are the people that direct us. So that's, that's how I'd answer it. But if anybody out there wants to give us a lot of money, we are more than willing to receive all of it.
Okay, thank you. This sadly is going to be our last question for tonight. It's kind of two questions in one. So for everybody, what does success look like to each of you, and what are your top priorities for change?
I'll jump in first. For me, for the Delta region, what success looks like to me is for Together for Hope to truly be able to be the voice for organizations, small communities, even big communities if need be, churches. We're able to be the voice and be able to have a seat at the table for the resources, the connections, the funding, the training, as well as the policy and the advocacy work. And when we come and have a seat at that table, they're understanding you look past the person that's sitting there, because I'm speaking for a multitude of people that represent this entire region. And that's one part of success, what I would see as success. But the other side is we have key people in communities. It doesn't matter the race, age, education, gender, but they are properly equipped to move their communities forward. And we've brought knowledge and resources in, and we're able to know that that knowledge and resources will be utilized for that area or that organization or the church to grow, and they would start creating pathways to start working together.
I would say that with our access to churches, then how we can mobilize churches and the resources they have to give, to bring volunteers and to build relationships and mutual partnerships. And part of that success, I think, is educating churches to do that the right way, to build partnerships that respect the dignity and look for the assets and not the deficits in a region. And of course, we want to see improvement in education and the economy and all of the four priorities of hope in each area.
I think my big picture answer to that is I want to see every single person have the opportunity to thrive. That is not happening. And for us, we see the answer to that through looking at these four priorities of hope that we've identified. So when everyone has a chance to get a high quality education, when everyone has access to health and nutrition, when we all have access to housing and a good environment, when we have ways to make money for ourselves, we can all thrive. And so that's the big picture goal, and those are the means that we use to get there.
And for me, kind of from a national perspective, and from a long view, I think the biggest way we can make a difference is through democracy. And right now, democracy is being threatened in a way that I've never seen it threatened in my lifetime, through gerrymandering, voter suppression, and through corporations buying off politicians. This is a threat to our democracy. And so today, the people have much smaller voices than they used to have, but we can still vote. And so being able to vote for change is a major thing. But campaign finance reform, if we can get a strong enough coalition across the country to make some changes there, that'll have huge ripple effects from a policy standpoint. And it'll right the social contract that's been out of whack for almost 50 years. And that's where the government, the people, or labor, and private industry work together for the greater good. Right now, that social contract is so skewed towards business that it is leaving the economic inequality gap higher than it's ever been in the history of the United States. Inequality is greater now than what it was during the robber baron period. So trying to right that social contract will have an incredible effect on rural America. So from a macro standpoint, that is some of the kind of things that we're working on in my office, so that everybody in the regions could feel the different effects of reversing NAFTA for that destroyed the Delta. So those kind of national policies can make a difference in those in our different rural regions.
Thanks to all of our panelists. Great discussion in the chat, great questions from the interns. I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here and say that for those of you who we missed your questions or we didn't have time to get to them, I'm happy for you to contact me and put you in touch with any of these folks who are doing this incredible work in rural spaces. And I'm so appreciative of, sorry about that, I was almost there. But I think that this gives a lot of insight. A community member just reached out a few minutes ago while Rachel was talking and commented on how important it is for us to say with more, to make sure that we're in partnership with, that we're listening to our communities first before we come in to tell. And Jason, I know I've heard you say that in many spaces. And, as Linda has indicated in many of her comments, it is our community members who know their places best and know where their wealth lies. So thank you to each of you, Keith, Rachel, Linda, and Jason, for continuing to step into this space and for setting an example for the rest of us about how we do this work. To our interns, Zoria, Will, Michaela, thank you for, this is their first week of work, y'all, and they're already stepping up and backing us up here. So thanks so much for, helping us guide this programming. Just a quick note before everybody departs for the evening. We are going to be moving into our second keynote event, which will be on Thursday, June 25th. That will happen at 6 p.m. Eastern. I encourage our panelists that join us tonight to join us for that event, which will feature the Executive Director of the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty, Jeremy Everett, to talk about the way in which food justice work is being done in that area and across Texas with the Texas Hunger Initiative, especially as the elevated need that COVID created continues to present itself over the course of the summer. So please save the date for that, and best wishes to each of you for good health and continued vigilance as we work to advance justice and human dignity for everyone. Good night.
Thank you.